It's superhero month, and what better way to talk about superhero movies than with the MCU? Like I said, I'm going to talk about the MCU in this video, and I'm going to have to talk really, really fast because if I don't, I'm not going to be able to fit in everything I want to say in this one video. So, buckle in, listen up, and let's go. Obviously, by this point, there's probably hundreds and thousands, and if not millions of videos on YouTube about people talking about MCU-related things. Superheroes are super popular right now, and the most popular thing is the MCU when it comes to superhero movies, so obviously everyone's always talking about it. There are probably countless lists online of people ranking their favorite MCU movies in order, and I'm gonna do that in this video, but I'm gonna introduce a new concept. This concept is relatively simple, but I feel like it helps bridge some gaps in discrepancies between various people's favorite MCU movies. Because at this point, there's been 18 MCU movies, and it's gonna be pretty hard to find someone whose list of your favorite MCU movies in order lines up with someone else's exactly the same. With that in mind, I've created a new system in which you can compare your favorite MCU movies with others and have some more general context. Complicated, I know, but you better believe I take this stuff seriously. Like I've said before, I'm a huge Marvel fan, and the MCU for the past 10 years has been everything my giddy little nerd kid heart could have wanted. And while I respect and love the MCU to no end, I also recognize the faults it has. So we're gonna talk about those, and I'm gonna tell you what exactly we're gonna get into. It's pretty simple, okay? My method for ranking MCU movies boils down to a 3-tier ranking system. The lowest tier, tier 3, the middle tier, tier 2, and top tier, tier 1. Every single Marvel MCU movie falls into one of these 3 tiers in my mind. Because honestly, in my mind, there's no Marvel MCU movie that is like total garbage. That's like completely unwatchable. You wouldn't ever want someone else to see it because it's one of the worst movies ever. I don't think any of the movies are that bad. But, having said that, there are definitely noticeable, vast differences between the weakest MCU movie and the best MCU movie. So what I always end up with is, you know, my group of favorite MCU movies, my group of MCU movies that, you know, I like, but not are my favorite, and then the group of MCU movies where I'm kind of like, it's not really that great. Now, the reason the system is important is because when I talk with other super geeky people who like the MCU movies as much as I do, which are few and far between, I can show them my tier system, and if they disagree with me on certain points and they say, okay, well this one's not my 17th favorite MCU movie, it's more like my 15th favorite MCU movie. That's fine, because obviously that's not a huge jump, and it's all would be considered, you know, in the same tier of MCU rankings in my mind. So people who have differences within the same tier, that's not gonna cause me to like have a reason to want to argue why you're wrong about how you view MCU movies. On the other hand, people who choose a movie that I put in tier 3 and say it's one of their tier 1 movies, then we're gonna have a discussion. Obviously, you know, movies are a subjective art form to an extent. So, obviously, this is just my opinion. Other people might have different opinions, but I would really like to see how many people who watch this video agree that within the same tiers, they would put those same movies, or if there's a movie that you feel like is in the wrong tier and deserves to be in a different tier altogether. So that's all the ridiculous, long, boring build-up to this video, and now I'm gonna get into my brackets, my different tiers of the MCU universe, and my own specific ranking of 1 through 17 Marvel movie. You might be thinking, Ethan, earlier you said there were 18 MCU movies. And you'd be right, but I would say in response, yes, there are 18 MCU movies, but Black Panther has still only come out in theaters, and I myself really enjoy rewatching these movies several times before I give them a definitive ranking. And even though I've seen Black Panther in theaters, and I really enjoyed it, I still haven't seen it enough times to give it a definitive ranking in the MCU. So, for the sake of this list, I'm not going to include Black Panther. So, I'm sorry if Black Panther is your all-time favorite MCU movie. Again, like I said, I like it a lot too, but I really like to rewatch it multiple times before I give a definitive answer. So, for the sake of this list, it's just not going to be in here. Now, let's get into this list. Tier 3. So, bottoming out the list in the 17th place, thus being my least favorite MCU movie, is The Incredible Hulk. Now, one thing to point out as I go through this list and name different things about different movies is a factor that I like to take in consideration. This factor is called the GME Awards. Nerd. Yes, I made up my own acronym for my own made up awards. You will have to deal with it or get out of this video. GME stand for Greatest Moments Ever, okay? They're the greatest moments in the MCU ever. And lots of MCU movies have individual moments which I consider to be some of the greatest in the MCU. Some of these moments, though, happen in movies that, aren't my favorite, but again, they still have a couple moments where I'm like, that's perfect. That's one of the greatest moments ever. I check my heart rate. I'm getting too excited talking about the MCU. I'm just gonna power through. So, for future context, if I mention a GME moment in a movie, now you know what that means. The reason, though, The Incredible Hulk is number 17, though, is because it has no GME moments. It's just meh. It's, it's not bad. It's not, awful, but, Ed Norton's not the perfect Bruce Banner, and the movie's just kinda, So 17. Number 16, Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2 is another case of a movie that I really don't hate. Again, it's not bad, it's just not kind of what I was hoping it would be. When we have the original Iron Man to compare Iron Man 2, it just falls short and it's noticeable. And it's also one of the first MCU movies that really spends just too much time world building. It introduces Black Widow, all this shield and all this Avenger future stuff, and there's, Captain America's shield, and there's things like that. And honestly, it just feels like a little much. It feels half-hearted in a lot of areas. The villain's not good, so because of that, it's number 16. Number 15, Thor: The Dark World. For a lot of the same reasons I've mentioned about Iron Man 2 and even The Incredible Hulk, this is the same reason Thor: The Dark World's down here. It's just kind of boring. It really doesn't add that much to the original movie. It doesn't really progress our character to new exciting areas, and it's just, kind of a place filler. Combine that all with a bad villain, and even though it has some cool, low-key Thor bonding brother moments, it's still not that awesome. So, number 15, Thor: The Dark World. Number 14 is Iron Man 3. So this is the first one on the list, which I think might cause some controversy. And I understand there's some people who, really like Iron Man 3. They're like, oh, it's great, it's Shane Black, it has great dialogue, it's, And I will admit, it has some cool moments again. But one of my issues is that I feel like it doesn't have that many, GME moments. None of the stuff in this movie really stands out as, my go-to things when I even think about Iron Man or the MCU in general. Just to be totally honest, though, I will admit I'm one of the people who really, really, really dislikes the Mandarin twist. It's a bad tease, it's a disservice to comic book fans, and it's one of the few examples in the MCU where they really divert from the source material a lot. I think it suffers for it. It's not as good of a movie. The pacing of the movie, though, even if you're a person who loves the Mandarin twist because you think, oh, it's so unconventional and, no one saw it coming, so that must mean it's great. Even if you're one of the people who thinks that, I still feel like the movie has a lot of issues just from an objective standpoint. The pacing's kind of It feels like several movies within one movie. The tone bounces around a lot. There's a lot of things thrown at you that just aren't that gripping. There's all these cool ideas, but they just never really have the payoff that I want them to have. And the villains are just not great. Guy Pearce as, the villain who we end up having as the main villain in the movie just isn't that engaging. And all of these lower ranked movies have bad villains. It's one of the things that makes them bad. But I feel like Iron Man 3, after the letdown that was Iron Man 2, just continued to be a letdown and never could recapture the awesomeness of Iron Man 1. So, Iron Man 3, number 14. Number 13, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, again, I know there are some people who really like this movie. And again, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not great. It's not nearly as good as the first one. And you can't help but compare the two together. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies, more so than anything else in the MCU, are kind of its own thing. They kind of only relate towards each other at this point. And even though there's some tie-ins and connections to like Thanos and stuff like that, we haven't had that crossover yet. So they kind of sit in their own little space. So you can't help but compare the first to the second. And when you do that, the second one falls short. Now, are there some awesome moments in this? Yes. But I still don't feel like there's really any GME moments. Moments that are, you know, stand out as some of the coolest things in the MCU. There's some scenes like the ending fight is, you know, different. It's kind of cool. And there's, you know, Yondu and Rocket's escape. And that's a cool scene. But again, it just doesn't stick with me. I don't know. People might disagree. But Guardians of the Galaxy, for me, comes in at number 13. And thus, it's the last movie in my tier 3. So again, the whole point of this tier system and why I'm explaining it like this is that if you, as an other fan of the MCU, don't have those movies exactly in the same order, but you agree that those 5 movies are the weakest in the MCU, then me and you are basically on the same page. Because for me personally, the difference between the worst movie in that bracket and the best movie in that bracket isn't an astronomical amount. There's a noticeable difference, and that's why I rank them that way, but if you say I like this one a little more than that one, it's not gonna hurt my feelings. I'd be like, okay, and we can move on. But if you try putting one of those movies in the top tier, in top 1, I just can't see it. Maybe you have a good argument, leave me a comment below and we'll talk about it. But for now, those are my bottom 5. Okay, so this video would be too long if I did tier 2 and tier 1, so I'm gonna have to save those for another video. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll stick around and watch my next video next week when it comes out, where I list the rest of my favorite movies. Like, comment down below, and join me as we just waste time until Infinity War comes out.